Hey folks, David Stewart here. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day. It is Wednesday. That means it's time for Newpub Talk, where I just talk about whatever stuff and interact with y'all. See what you want to talk about for the most part today. If I run out of fun things to say, then I'll probably just do a little live writing or a little business while we talk, so you guys can get an inside glimpse at how all of that works, which I do like doing for my streams. On the live write, we've actually created, we wrote a whole book. Well, not a whole book. We wrote a short book earlier this year, and we'll complete a full-length novel through that process this year as well. We just wrapped up, I think, chapter 16. So if you're on Patreon, which should be in the description box, if not, I'm going to go ahead and link it here. Patrons get not only, they get a bunch of benefits, but one of the things you get is you can read the manuscript. You can read the transcript, sort of, the manuscript of what I've been doing on the live writes. Those are going to be on Friday now. So I had been doing them on Saturday. I switched it to Friday last week, and I'm going to do that again going forward, so that my weekends are a little more clear for other kinds of activities. As well as just, it just ends up working a little bit better for scheduling when you can have a whole day in the weekend to do stuff with the family. Plus, I'll be gone this weekend anyway. There'll still be a video coming out and another Substack article tomorrow. So make sure you're subscribed on Substack. If you are a paid subscriber on Substack, you can get a copy of the live write transcripts as well. So you get, if you're a patron, you get keys to prolific creativity right away. Everybody gets that. You get an access to the live write stuff. Plus you get another free book every month that's rotating. This month it's a deep cut. It's called Farewell to Once and Future Kings. It's a sci-fi spies in space kind of story that I wrote a while back, and it was part of an anthology called Pulp Rock, and so I thought it'd be fun. A lot of people didn't get it because it was part of an anthology that wasn't part of my brand. That's just the way a lot of things work with anthologies. If you want a little inside glimpse into, maybe I should do this anthology or that anthology, I'm not trying to discourage anyone, but in a lot of cases, it's not going to sell as well as if it was just your brand, because readers tend to be willing to buy things that are your brand, and if it's not your brand, they're a little bit more hesitant because there's more uncertainty involved. You would think that it would be the opposite. I'm going to do an anthology, and I'm going to have all of these different authors. They should all bring their audience in to buy that anthology, and that makes sense. But in the real world, it doesn't end up working that way. In the real world, it's like a compilation CD, right? If you have a compilation CD that has Metallica on it, that compilation CD will sell better than if it didn't have Metallica on it, for sure. But it's not going to sell as well as just a Metallica album. So you have to keep that in mind. It's like, and I'm not saying anybody's bad for not buying Pulp Rock or for buying it. I thought it was a cool anthology. There was a lot of stuff in it. I was in with a lot of authors that I like and who are original thinkers and do stuff that's kind of outside the box. My story was very outside the box for kind of what I tend to do, as well as just, I was like, I really wanted to go with like a spy story. I think it would be a lot of fun, and I thought it was a good story. So anyway, you get that as part of your patron benefits for those of you who are Patreon subscribers. So it's a potential, like if you were to subscribe this month, you could get potentially like 4 or 5 books for free, because there'd be that one, which is the monthly book, Keys to Prolific Creativity, the book that I'm writing now, plus the one that I wrote earlier, which was Sorcerer's Blood, which is what I wrote on the air. So anyway, fun stuff to talk about. So yeah, I just gave you some of that. So a lot of authors I've talked to who've done anthologies have found that it is not always a winning proposition. That is to say, you're not always making money at the endeavor. So if you're going to do an anthology, do it because you think it'll be fun. Do it because you think it would be a cool product to have, that it's something you'd be interested in reading yourself. Those are all good reasons to do it. If you're looking to like amplify it as a sales technique, probably not. And I did a anthology. It's back here somewhere. I think it's still free. Corona Chan, Spreading the Love. This was basically a free anthology I did at the beginning of the lockdown so that people could have some free reading material. Anyway, you still get the big magazine version, I think, and this has one of my books in it, and by a bunch of other authors too. And you've got this cover by George over here, so it's really good. But free helps. It was a bestseller technically, right? But I don't know if it did as well as, like, I don't know. If any one of us on the back had been like doing our own book and we put it all together, it probably would have done better. That's just the way it is. But look, this cost me nothing. Everybody did it as an act of charity. So that helps that to stay free, is that nobody got paid for this. And I've never gotten paid for this. And we did it purely as a fun charitable project. But if you're trying to make money with an anthology and you're trying to pay authors and you're trying, it's really easy to lose money in it, or to be in a position where it's going to take years to make the investment back. And that's the way a lot of books work. Kind of with any creative project. It takes it's not so much about ROI, like what's the return on investment, but how long does it take to get back into the black, to recoup the initial investment and then really start making money on it. For some books, it can take years. Other books are profitable the first day that they're out. So being able to have a cheap cover, that can help a lot. If you can get like 99 designs, if you can get a $50 pre-made cover for your book, if it's a standard piece of genre fiction, that can go a really long way towards making it so that you can make money on your book. Just keeping that cover expense low. Just keeping all your expenses low. If you don't have like a series to pump, it's probably a good idea to not advertise on Amazon, or to hold off on that until you have multiple books in a series that you'd like to. You advertise the first one and you get read through on it. You could just be digging yourself a deeper hole, trying to somehow hope that you can make it back with like priming the pump, getting the sales up enough that people will buy the book. It's like, you really, in order to prime the book on Amazon now, you really got to be willing to spend a lot of money, I think. That's just kind of the way it is. I think you can make money advertising over the long run if you have especially a series that you can, it may cost you 25 cents or more to get a person to click on your ad, to get your ad shown. So a person will click on it and then maybe buy it, right? That could be your entire profit for the first book you could spend on advertising. But if you can do that, even if you're losing money on book one, you can end up making it up if the person can read book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5, book 6 on down the line. That's like the 20 books to 50K strat. Is you write like a 20 novel series, and then you just advertise the crap out of book 1, and eventually you're making money on it because of people buying through the series. And if you keep the book short enough, you leave it a cliffhanger, you write it with a certain technique, you can keep people continuing to pick up the series and buy it, all the way through. But it takes a long time to build that up. So for a lot of people, it's like, keep your expenses low so that you can have money in the bank to do the next project, rather than, I spent $1,500 on my book, and it's like, and I've sold 3 copies. Like, how long will it take to make my $1,500 back? It's like, you may never make that money back. So especially if you're early in the game, or if you do what I sometimes do, which is I release books that I know are not commercial. They're just not commercial books, So if they're not commercial books, no big deal. If people don't buy them, keep my expenses low. Make my cover for free, basically, as part of the rest of my business, and whatever money I make, I'm good. I'm golden, So keeping your expenses low can allow you to release books that are maybe outside of the genre tropes, outside of genre expectations, some things that aren't really commercial. I think most authors that are a little bit new to this, they run into the problem in thinking that they can write their passion project, and if they spend a lot of money on things like editing and a good book cover, that will make up for the fact that their book is not directed towards the market, that it doesn't fit nicely into the genre that they're supposed to be writing in, which actually makes it a lot harder to sell the book. So many people, I think, get sucked into this. They just have a bad expectation about what they're doing. They're like, it's my book that I've been working on forever, and I'm going to come out with it, and I'm going to make money and be a best-selling author. And then they come out with it, and no one buys it. They're like, oh no. And it's like, well, it's really hard to sell a book. Okay, selling books is hard. This is a tough business. But also, your book is not, it's not hitting the genre hard. It's not hitting the subgenre it's in hard at all. It doesn't have the tropes that people want to read. It doesn't have the cliches that they want to see. That's not a bad thing. That can be a really good thing, but it can be a thing that makes it harder to sell the book in the market. So just keep that in mind. It's not so much about, getting a return, but how long it takes to get back into the black. And I think for anthologies, there's just not as much readership, and people don't read short fiction. Some people do, right? And Kursova magazine's good. I will, I'll stand for them. There's still guys around making short fiction exist. But modern readers tend to not buy a lot of it. And I don't know why that is, but they're just used to reading novels, so that's the main thing, is books that are longer, But the cool thing about Amazon is that there's nothing to say you can't sell your short story just on its own on Amazon if you want to. You could totally do that. You could make a 99-cent short read. They're all over the place, and they actually do pretty good. So, keep that in mind as well. If you have an anthology of short fiction, where's the readers for it? It's hard to find them. Albert says, I know a guy who spends so much money on publishing his books. Luckily, he has modest audience, so he does sell, but I don't know if he's in the black in spite of that. Yeah, what a lot of people want is they want to be a best-selling author, and there's nothing wrong with this. By the way, this is not a judgment as I say this. People have dreams. Their dream is to be a best-selling author, and they will sink money into it to make that happen. And that's fine as long as they're not. I mean, as long as they have the money that they want to spend it. If they felt like that was how they wanted to spend the money they had in the bank, that's their money, and it's their dream that they get to pursue, and they can do it however they want to. A lot of people lose money in the business because it's their ego. They want to be an author more than they want to engage in the business of being a publisher or of being an author or of being a writer. They like to have written more than they liked writing, for instance. That's why I feel like so many indie authors just jumped on the AI. Can I get AI to write my books? What is the point of this? What is the point of your art if you're going to have a computer do it? Well, I'm trying to think of a product to sell. It's like, are you going to put your name on it? Of course, because I want to be a best-selling author. It's like, well, you aren't one. If you have ChatGPT or whoever write your books and you edit them and put your name on it, you aren't an author. You are at best a robot programmer. You're not an author, and that's we got to be real with that. Same thing with ghostwriting, right? Oh, I paid this ghostwriter to write my book for me. Well, you're not an author. Now, I can actually see the case for ghostwriting for a lot of people. Like if you are running a business and your business is like a consulting business, but you aren't really a writer. Well, you farm that out. You have a co-writer that does most of the prose heavy lifting. You work with him to outline the book, and it's your ideas. If you're doing a diet book, it's your diet, your exercise routine, and then that ghostwriter punches it up in Word and publishes it with you and makes money with you, or you pay them a lot, because that is an advertisement for your consulting business. So yeah, you can use ghostwriters, but people who are in the fiction business wanting to use like Filipino ghostwriters, which is what I think some of these guys did. They got in trouble for plagiarism, like Mark Dawson. My guess is he was just using he was farming out a lot of the books. He was using ghostwriters to write the books so that he could put out a large volume of books and focus really intensely on how to make the story exactly point at the market and advertise it and do the marketing thing, right? He's more of a publisher. I don't know, like a chief publisher, an editor-in-chief, rather than an actual author, if you're doing that. So anyway, that's my opinion on that. Right. Books and series, people want lots of the same story. Yeah, that's the truth. Is that there's this idea, my thing's so original. It's like, people actually don't want originality. I mean, it seems like they do, but you have to really convince them to take a chance on something that's original, and it has to really pay off in the way that they want. Harry Potter might have been original for the mid-90s or whenever it first came out. It might have seemed original to audiences, but it really delivered. It really delivered on its promises, and so people that took a chance on Harry Potter, like I didn't originally read Harry Potter partly because it was obviously a kid's book. It was a scholastic book with like a pastel colored, cover that looked like a kid's illustrated book. My sister read them and she's like, actually, they're really good. You should take a chance on them. Like, kid goes to wizard school. This doesn't seem why would this be a cool fantasy story? Well, it was actually pretty good. So you get the payoff from taking the chance on that. And then everybody copies it, and then you wait a while and someone else is able to kind of break through that kind of wall of genre sameness and do something original. It's hard to know what's going to hit. So for me as an author, I really focus on the stories that I'm really excited to tell. And I do keep an eye to the market because I want to think about what kind of readers would want to read the stories that I'm writing. But that doesn't, it doesn't make me shy away from writing stories that I know are not going to be a big commercial success because of the way that they are. All Shafalda I knew wasn't going to be a big success, and I pretty much said it when I released it. I'm like, this is a fantasy story, it's a tragedy, it's got this in it, and this bad ending, right? Like, people are not going to feel satisfied by that most of the time. It's just a different kind of book from what most people are reading in fantasy, and that's fine. For some people, that's like an amazing book. For other people, they didn't want to buy it, and that's fine. You don't have to. GW says reading is a considerable investment compared to modern media alternatives. Now, we'll push back on that in a second. If someone's going to make the effort to invest themselves in a world, they likely want more world to enjoy. So I would say modern media tends to be really time-bloated compared to days of yore. So compared to a movie, a book is a much bigger time investment. You are 100% correct. But you have to think about compared to a TV series. Compared to a TV series, a book, your book in particular, may be much less of a time investment. Now, Game of Thrones may take 30 hours or something to read the Game of Thrones book, and it's I think the first season is only 12 hours. But 12 hours is still a substantial amount of time to invest in a story for the payoff that you get at the end of Game of Thrones, which is, the only character people really liked dying. Spoilers! Years after the fact, right? So anyway, yeah. So I think modern TV shows are really time bloated. They're soap operas. It's like Days of Our Lives, but medieval. If that's what you enjoy, that's fine. By the way, there's no judgment. But I do think that a lot of modern media is really bloated. Games are extremely bloated. They're like, people are like, you got to play. Here's this new game, and it touts 100+ hours of gameplay. When I see that, I'm like, is that 100 hours of me enjoying the crap out of this game, or is that 100 hours of filler side quest garbage and meandering story that just kind of takes you through set pieces and doesn't really do anything? You know, I enjoyed all the hours that I spent playing Dragon Age Origins, which was substantial. I wanted to say it was like a 60-hour game, probably more. But, you know, it had enough depth and enough story that it could carry you all the way through that. When I see 100 hours on a game, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I could keep being interested after 100 hours. So I think a lot of modern games have gotten really time bloated. And with a game, that's another one too, where it's like, oh, it's 100 hours and $70. It's like, I'd rather play a game that's 12 hours and $20, personally. Slightly off topic, but after playing the Mass Effect trilogy 5 times now, this is totally on topic now. Not only do I think 2 is my least favorite, but I think it's actually not a good game. Going from 1 to 2 is rough. I agree 100% on that. And there's a lot of reasons why I think Mass Effect 2 is the worst of the series. And I don't think I thought it... I didn't play Mass Effect 3 for a long time until people on the channel were like, nah, you gotta play it. It's actually pretty good. And it was okay. It was the gameplay of 2, which is much worse than the gameplay of 1, of the original Mass Effect game. In my opinion, I think the original Mass Effect had far more interesting gameplay with the heat mechanic than Mass Effect 2, which was just another game of find the ammo, right? You guys have played that with shooter games since the beginning. Kill the room, run around, get the ammo so you have enough ammo to clear the next room. It got particularly annoying if you played on Nightmare Mode. And if you weren't playing on Nightmare Mode on Mass Effect 2, the game, in my opinion, could get too easy. It could just get too easy to be fully interesting. But if you're just kind of wanting to get through the levels, then maybe. And the levels weren't super interesting in Mass Effect 2. They looked nice. Some of them were okay. I felt like Mass Effect 1 had more diverse and interesting levels overall. Although they weren't designed like, this is a, bunch of chest-high walls as far as the eye could see in Mass Effect 2, whereas Mass Effect 1 didn't have that. They looked more like real spaces that people might be in. Everything in Mass Effect 1 felt grittier and more real, more like real spaces, even with all the reused assets that they did for budgetary reasons. It still felt way better than Mass Effect 2. Mass Effect 2 was still okay. I think people liked Mass Effect 2 because it was graphically really good for the time, and it had all these characters, and people liked the characters. And the main thing I realized about Mass Effect 2 is I don't really like the characters very much. Virtually none of the characters I really took an interest in. I did all of their quests because that's what it is. It's like, it's a bunch of side quests that fill up all the time, and then you go and attack the collectors. Whereas Mass Effect 1, it felt like nothing was a side quest. Everything was relevant to what you were doing. Everything was directing you towards the discovery of the mystery of the Reapers, and then you went and you found that, and you warped in and you beat the Reaper, you beat Sovereign, and won the game, and it was great all the way through. Mass Effect 3 has that direction. It's like you're directed towards this goal. You're trying to figure out the solution. Mass Effect 2, it's like, who are the collectors? We kind of know at the end, like, they were enslaved by the Reapers. Like, okay, and they were maybe helping the Reapers to reproduce. We never really discovered, like, the full depth of that, I think. And so it's a good, the conclusion's a bit of a letdown. But really, it's just that the game doesn't have a strong structure. It's just a bunch of side quests. And maybe that's what people liked, and if you like that, that's fine. No judgment. That's good in its own way. But yeah, I think it's a big step down gameplay-wise. I think it's a step down in terms of the lore. I think it messes up the lore. It puts you having to work for Cerberus. It just does a bunch of things that are weird that I didn't like. And I didn't find the characters all that interesting or compelling, to be honest. Just me. I thought the characters of the first one were a lot more interesting. I like the gritty, dark, kind of film grainy look of the original one. And I think they scrubbed that out. I think they got rid of that in the Legendary Edition. I'll have to check it out because I have the Legendary Edition, but I didn't play it. It's like, did they get rid of the... What does it feel like? Because the original one in Unreal 3 had this feeling to it that was really good as far as the visuals. And I think by trying to go higher fidelity and higher texture quality and all that, I think you lose some of that feeling. I wish to extend the pioneering attitude of the early mid-20th century fantasy greats. As an author, I'm speaking of bending over backwards to bring these elders to the forefront. Yeah, I'd much rather read the original books compared to television adaptation. I feel the same way. It feels more efficient at those lengths. There's more depth to it. like, it's really hard for me to say, is there anything where the movie or TV show is better than the book? I can't think really of any examples. And maybe Princess Bride, but Princess Bride as a book has its own qualities that work as a book. So I'm hesitant to say that one, right? I think the book is maybe not as good. It's not, but it is funny in its own way. So yeah, if you see a new adaptation of a book coming out, my response is, well, skip the movie and read the book, because you know the book is going to be a better experience. It's a good enough book that they're going to make a movie out of it, and so the best possible experience is likely to be a book. Actually, I would say The Hunger Games is probably better as a movie, and that's because of the prose style of The Hunger Games, which is atrocious. It's written in like present tense or something. It reads like a bad screenplay. It's really terribly written. And I don't throw that out there as a jealous thing. It's just like, I don't know how someone could bother to read this unless they just had no experience reading prose, and because it's an awful feeling to read. It just reads like, I don't know, it reads like processed. It's the reading equivalent of eating white sugar, right? Like, there's an experience to just eating white sugar that some people like. Kids will happily eat the white sugar, but sometimes you can have a taste of sugar and be like, that was nice, it tasted sweet, I'm done. Because I've written stuff in present tense before. I've written stuff in second person present tense, but it's only like 1,000 words, not a whole book. So you read that, it's like, imagine trying to eat like a whole bag of sugar. A Mass Effect trilogy is fun, but that trilogy narrative is busted. 2 is a waste of time. Exactly, I agree with you, John. That's what it is. That you could get the entire story by leaving 2 out. If you could skip that game, then it doesn't need to be there in terms of narrative. And I don't think the gameplay's that great, so why bother with it? You barely like, I mean, your boss, what's he called? The something man. He gets like indoctrinated or something in the 3rd game, and it's like, you didn't really need a whole game of you talking to him, because they didn't really do much with him. By the time you get to the 3rd game, it's like, well, we actually have to solve the conflict in this game, so they do that. Which means you really didn't need the 3rd game. What you needed for a 2nd game is, rather than this mystery of solving who are the collectors, you just needed to be some other kind of cosmic conflict between the various factions, trying to convince people the Reapers are coming, and dealing with a galactic war. And by the fallout of the galactic war is that the Reapers then show up, whatever happens. That would have been a much better one. You have to kind of think that the second part of a trilogy has to be a 2nd act overall, where there's a lot of chaos. Things are changing, people are realigning, people are strategizing for the final act. All of those things are getting rearranged to make the final act happen. They didn't really do that. They just kind of had you wander around for a game. And some people really like that. I know that that's a lot of people's favorite game of the series, but for my money, number one is a top 10 game for me. The other ones don't come close. Mass Effect 2 fails for one big reason. No Mako. That's another thing, too. They had the little hopper, which was... The Mako is bad, and it controls bad, and the Mako missions are bad. Maybe. Poor dog. Maybe they're bad, but they lend the missions a certain gravitas. They give it a feeling like the world that you're landing on is more than just like the little chesty McWall-high level that you are walking through, that you are actually moving through space. Think of that level where you're going through like the fallen civilization, battling eventually a plant that like duplicates an Asari. you just spend a lot of time in the Mako going over these ancient highways and, yeah, sometimes blowing up other ships, but it makes it feel like you're part of something really big rather than just showing up in a level with a bunch of chest-high walls to kill guys and look for ammo. You know, the Mako added a lot. And sort of streamlining is what I need to work on in my writing, keeping as many things relevant to the plot as possible. Yeah, you don't have to. You kind of want to think like any scene you're writing. There's setting, characters, and plot, and you want to be developing one of those in any scene. And if you get to a scene where none of those are being developed, that's probably a scene that needs to be cut. And if you get to a scene and it's just developing one of those, can it do one of the others at the same time? So if it's here and it's developing setting, can we have some character development happen while we are doing some exposition on the setting? Brandon Sanderson's very good at that. The exposition on the setting happens while characters are doing things. So you get a sense that the story tension is still happening, even though it's really clear with certain chapters of his books, the focus of this is the exposition of the world, of the setting, so that you can think about how things work for later on in the books. So trying to do more than one thing at a time is good. And even if you look at someone like Tolkien, who at sometimes can be indulgent when it comes to like having poems about some past event, that adds a real depth to the setting. So he's working on the setting through those poems. They are not in the prose in a lot of cases. They're kind of interrupting the prose, but it adds some depth to the world. And in a lot of cases, it is the characters having, with that poem, reacting to something that's happening. So it's a bit like an aria in an opera in a lot of cases. So, keep that in mind. Either contributing to the plot or reinforcing the theme so it feels cohesive, yeah. I will judge you. Mass Effect 2 takes away so many RPG elements. There's only 2 weapons for each category. Armor upgrades are limited. And worst off, less powers overall. Yep, less powers. Your squad doesn't, like, Mass Effect, like, position. You could position your squad in certain ways to do things. You would kind of... You'd set up your squad based on what kind of powers you might want your squad to be able to do, and you could create all kinds of cool combos in Mass Effect 1. It's like, okay, you're gonna... I'm gonna have... Liara like levitate them, and then I'm gonna squish them, and then we're gonna have Rex like charge in and blow them up or something, right? So you could think about how you're gonna arrange your little party to do maximum damage. I really loved those elements. It was unfortunate they got rid of those. Jaws movie is better than the book. I forgot Jaws was a book. Forrest Gump movie is much better than the book. Now, I never read the book. My parents read it, and they thought the book was better than the movie. But, yeah, I've heard that as well. People say The Boys Show is a lot better than the original comic. Never read the comic. It's kind of post-Ground Zero for me, so I'm not interested in... Most comics that come out after the 90s, I'm just not really interested in reading, and I haven't read very many of them. And I think The Boys is one. The other one would be Invincible. Right. I liked the first season of Invincible because of its hyper violence, whereas I felt incredibly annoyed by most of the characters, and I thought a lot of them were stupid. I was like, some of the crazy violence just happening out of nowhere made that a really entertaining show. I tried reading The Princess Bride, but it was harder to get into compared to the movie. The Last Unicorn, meanwhile, was on par or better than the movie. I didn't know The Last Unicorn was a book, so maybe I'll figure that out. I thought Patriot Games was better a film than the book. That's the only example I could think of. I just finished listening to War of the Worlds broadcast vinyl LP. That's cool. Hello from Luke the Duke. The Elusive Man. Thank you. The Elusive Man. Yeah, Mass Effect 1 really works the best by itself. I wrote a couple of short stories in present tense. My editor husband doesn't prefer it, but he said it works. It worked, yeah. I've written short stuff in present tense, or even second person, like you do this, you do that, to like evoke the feeling of a person being in a space. But I don't do that for like a whole book. Again, it'd be like eating sugar. Like you can have a taste of sugar and you're like, that's good. But if you eat a whole bag of sugar, there's nothing, you know what I mean? No, I think you could do more with past tense. Do you have any input regarding the new Conan comic series? No, not really. I haven't checked it out. The Mako was the part of the game that felt like you were exploring an alien world. Yeah, it made it feel like you were on a planet, not on a level. Ashley Williams. Ashley Williams did nothing wrong. I thought Ash was a great character. People didn't like Ash. I thought Ash was a cool character. I thought Kaiden was a cool character too. He wasn't very liked. He's usually the one people choose to kill. You're gonna kill Ash or Kaiden. It's like, or is it Kaiden? Kaiden. Like, oh, we're gonna kill Kaiden. Did you kill Rex? It's like, why would you kill Rex? No. You got to speechcraft your way out of killing Rex. He's too cool a character, right? So, and in BioWare style, there's a lot of cases the illusion of choice. Like, you can choose to kill the Arachnite Queen or not, but that doesn't actually affect the way the story goes. Like, you could choose to kill Rex or not. It just means Rex isn't there for the final act. He doesn't affect anything, right? You can kill him or not. It's just whether do you want to talk to him sometimes after that. You know, it doesn't really change the outcomes of the story. Same thing if you choose Kaiden or Ash, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the outcomes of the story at all. Forrest Gump's the ultimate ode to baby boomers. Yeah. Kaiden was a cardboard cutout figure. I thought he was okay. But I obviously I don't think he's that great, or if I'm always killing him. I'm always killing the guy. He's just like, I have headaches from, my training. Okay, cool. We don't really get any more of him after the first game. Either, and that's a pity. I find it funny that people call Ashley racist when everyone's favorite character, Morden, happily admits to committing genocide. Yep. It'd be interesting to see some really in-depth choose-your-own-adventure style games or stories, but that's a lot of work to make happen. It's better in the visual novel space. If you're making a gameplay-heavy story, having branching storylines, it's cutting out parts of the game for the player. Tactics Ogre did it, and it's a pretty good game, but you're not missing that much, right? But with a visual novel, it's all about choose-your-own-adventure, so that's probably a better format to do it. If you wanted to do really complex branching storylines. Most of them still don't do really complex branching storylines, just like, who's your girlfriend at the end? Who's your boyfriend at the end? If you're playing like, what is it, Hakuiki? That one. I think I did a review of that one. I did this game, this visual novel, and it's very much marketed towards women, right? You have like a harem of hot samurais that you choose from, right? Cute samurais. I just chose like the main one. Yeah, visual novels are a good story for that. But it's cool. Like we're like, well, that one's for like girls. Like, but boys play this one. Why? It's like because samurai are cool. Samurai are cool. So the main character chooses a boyfriend. It's like, so whatever. You just pick like the guy you think is coolest. You don't have like it. You don't have to feel like you want to be with that guy. Just be like, no, I want that guy to be with my character. You don't have to be the target audience to enjoy things, right? Like, there's boys who enjoy My Little Pony. You know what I mean? That's a lot of surface level understanding of Ash. She wasn't racist. She just didn't trust the council to care about humanity's interests, and the story proved her right. Yeah, she was correct. She did nothing wrong. Ashley feels like an actual character. She believes in God, loves her family, has a bad history with the Turians. Caiden's always just kind of there. He went to biotic camp, killed his instructor. Lame. I don't hate him. I think it's actually kind of a cool backstory. They didn't do a whole lot with it. And I like the voice actor. It's the same actor as what's his face from Knights of the Old Republic. I want to say Kyle Katarn, but that's from Jedi Knight and Dark Forces. I don't remember who I'm thinking of. Kyle Arasi? Anyway, it's that actor. I think he did a good job. I spent hours playing Fate Stay Night visual novel with my husband when we were students. That sounds like fun, yeah. What am I thinking of? Hakuiki, that's it. Hakuoki. 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 Yeah, that's it. That's the one. It looks like. Let's find some. Looks like this. I did this one. I don't think I did a review. I should just do like a little review of it sometime. Right? It's like here she is with like her harem of guys. Actually, no, that's not her. That's like a different vampire character, demon character. Oh, here she is. Chizuru with like all of her dudes she can pick. Which dude do you like the best? I think I did this guy who's like the leader. You have to constantly feed him your blood or he dies in the last act. Wait, it's like, wait, I have to always do what's bad? He's like, yeah, if you want him to live, you got to give him your blood. It was a good one. It was good. Same thing, like I've read Twilight. Like, how could you read Twilight? It's like, well, you can read things that are for not your target demographic and have an understanding of them, right? Like I watch My Little Pony with my daughter. I have an understanding of My Little Pony. I kind of have to. I'm a dad, you know. So yeah, I'm not the target audience for Dora the Explorer, but I've seen a few episodes on TV in 2006 when I was 6 or 7 years old, and it drew my interest to Latin American culture. It wasn't the show itself, but the cultural influence. Interesting. Lyrics on the public airwaves were really vague back then, unless one had Stereo Master. I get the feeling the main demographic for Princess Maker style visual novels games are men. I feel like it's... So, the fact that one, I believe, was directed towards women, but was still popular with men because it was a setting men liked, which was like Meiji Restoration Samurai. It's an interesting historical period, and guys like that kind of stuff, and guys like complex plots, and so they don't really care about investing in the romance maybe as much, but they're just like, yeah, okay, I want this guy to like Chizuru or whatever. But the harem ones are definitely directed towards men, where it's like you have a male character and then you have like a fleet of female characters who want you, and you pick one. Like pick your waifu. That's definitely directed towards men. And I think this one, that element, like pick your husbandu, is directed towards females. I think that's for a female audience. And I've known a couple, I had a couple of female students who like visual novels and they liked this kind of stuff. When they read manga, they liked romance manga, It just kind of goes with the part of the demographic that gets targeted towards, and they enjoy that, Sword Art Online, I think that's a kind of a harem one, isn't it? No. I think the Fate game started as like a straight up hentai visual novel, if I'm not mistaken. I think they were straight hentai originally. And then got kind of toned down and made more mainstream. Yeah, I think that's the one I'm thinking of. Fate, where like they have like guardians or something. I don't remember it very much. Never got into it. Anything else that we could talk about today that'd be interesting? Oh, yeah. So there was another assassination attempt. That was interesting. What's worth watching in terms of politics is how stories are framed. How do you spin the story? What's the story that you tell? Remember that stories have a setting, they have characters, they have a plot. So there's events. A big job of the media in terms of its propagandistic use is to contextualize the events that are happening in a way that they fit with a characterization that they want the characters to have, whether that character is Donald Trump or someone else. And they fit the overall themes of the story they're trying to tell. What's the theme of our current political story? It is save democracy. That's why they say democracy over and over again, right? So their conflict is there's a threat to democracy in the form of this person who wants to be a dictator. He's like Darth Sidious, trying to to take over the republic from within and destroy it. So all the events for that setup of this conflict that they set up, rather than it's an election about certain political beliefs or ideas for how you should organize the state, it is instead a life or death struggle for the republic itself. But they don't use republic because it's a Republican running. They use democracy. Democracy is shorthand for good stuff. It doesn't. There's nothing democratic about what's going on. Kamala Harris was not democratically elected the representative of the Democrat Party. She never won the primary. She never even really ran in the primary. She was just de facto became the candidate by fiat of whoever's in charge of the Democrat Party. So, I mean, like, the whole Democrat thing kind of falls flat on its face if you look deep into 2020 as well. It's like, yeah. If you look at their actions, how can we use the courts to take Trump off the ballot? Can we arrest Trump so he can't run? These are against the demo, against the people, right? But democracy is everybody, you're raised in school to think democracy is good. I was, from the age of 5 on, everybody believed democracy was good because that's what they told you in school. So to save the democracy, which is the good things, you have to just defeat the bad guy. So all the events get contextualized in that, is that if there's a debate that happens, it's defeating fascism. That's who won the debate. It's a debate against fascism itself. They don't know what fascism is. I read this whole book by, what's his name? It was called American Fascists. The dude had no idea what fascism was. He wrote a whole book without knowing what fascism was. Completely idiotic. Anyway, they use that. There's an assassination attempt. Okay, how do we spin this? Well, in our hearts, we want people to believe the assassination would be good for democracy, because they believe that. They believe the assassination would be good for democracy, even though that's a contradiction in terms, because he's such a dangerous person that if he were democratically elected, he would destroy the democracy. You see the contradiction there? But we're going to gloss that over and be like, okay, well, he caused this by being bad. He caused the people trying to kill him, and apparently there was a bomb in a car, like today. The people trying to kill him are doing so because he's bad. And maybe their means, because we want people to defeat fascism at the voting booth. We're going to defeat the dictator by voting him out. It's stupid to anyone who has 2 brain cells to rub together, right? But that's the narrative that they run with, because it's about telling the story and affecting people's emotions properly, right? Here we have Mega Hitler, Orange Man, and he needs to be defeated. And so people are going to take that literally. They're caught up in the narrative and emoting, and they're like, we have to get rid of him to defeat democracy. Well, I'm going to go get rid of him. I'm going to do it. And so they're going and doing it, right? Or they're being encouraged to do it by certain people possibly, right? But the point is, in the context of the story, it can't be a bad thing. You can't say it's a bad thing if he has to be gotten rid of by any means necessary, and you've said that, right? In the context of everything that's happening, you're left with a problem where we can't, the media can't outwardly say that it's good. But within the conflict that they've established in their story, it has to be good. So every event is contextualized according to the conflict of the novel, basically, that they're writing in real time in everybody's minds. And in that novel, the conflict is between the demo, the people, and the dictator. How are you going to defeat him? By voting. That's what they want people to think of. They want them to be really encouraged to vote against the dictator. And then if they have to conjure up more votes somehow, then it's correct, right? Because if he gets elected, then it could be the last election ever, right? If he gets elected, it could be the last election ever. We have to fix the election. We have to rig it. We have to fortify it. We have to have precincts where there's more people voting than there are registered voters. Have to have that, because if we didn't have that, then that would be the last election ever. So yeah, we have to give up. We have to not have an election so that we can have future elections. Yeah, Zimamaro, no one knows what fascism is. Fascist is just a shorthand for bad guy. It doesn't mean anything, and it's been used that way since like the 70s, by the way. It's nothing new. They just use it as a shorthand for like, dude who wants me to not smoke dope is fascist. Dude who wants me to live, to have responsibility in my life is a fascist. Dude who wants things to be good is a fascist, right? It's their shorthand for people who aren't me. Yeah, people have never thought about the Mussolini's government as being fascist. They think of Adolf Hitler, a National Socialist. And if you were to compare those systems, those government systems, they're much closer to the Democrat way of doing it than the Republican. Much closer. So it's a stupid thing, like, the Democrats are the real fascists. In a literal sense, they are. But they part of this using the same words over and over again, right? And like Trump came out with this thing that's like, here's all these people saying Trump is an existential threat to democracy. They use democracy over and over again. They use fascism over and over again. So it programs people to just have an emotional response to the word fascism or democracy. Democracy is us. It's good. It's our power. Fascism, bad. It's them. They're bad. They're bad. They're Hitler, bad. Hitler, bad. Just Satan. Forget about Satan. No one believes in Satan anymore. So we'll just have Hitler. Yeah. So that's how they do it. That's all it is. The media treats Trump like the incumbent, so Kamala doesn't share any blame for what has happened under Biden, and she has a clean slate. Yep. If you treated Trump like the incumbent, you'd have to look at the 4 years he was in office and be like, oh, well, they were significantly better than the 4 years that the next guy was in office. There was less war, better economy, everything was better. Everything was better. Now, Trump made some big mistakes, especially with like the vaccine rollout and things like that. Did not have a perfect pregnancy. Trump didn't have a perfect presidency. He didn't do some of the things he talked about, like build the wall. He actually didn't do a lot of the things he promised. But if you just compare the two, it's like you can't win comparing Biden's reign to Trump's presidency. You just can't win with that. You can win with people who have no memory or are so ideologically driven that stuff doesn't matter. Yeah, smooth brains can't tell the difference between general authoritarianism and fascism. They can't. Also, the second shooter had a tweet saying democracy's on the ballot, which so many lefties saying, democracy's on the ballot. Wait, you can vote against democracy? I'm doing that. Book I'm working on has accelerationist villains. I take a lot of inspiration from mainstream media propaganda. Yeah. Accelerationism, I'm not into that either. I'm like, no, you don't want to. It's not like pulling a bullet out that hurts and makes you better. It's like, no, you're just inflicting more pain, and it probably won't accelerate anything. Do you know what I mean? All right. Hey, what's the Discord? The Discord's private. Okay. It's part of the Patreon. I will send out invites if you're on Patreon. Okay. What else? So yeah, that's a big one. What are some other ones? So yeah, there was that's still developing, as there was possibly a car bomb at a Trump event. How did the shooter know that Trump was going to be at the golf course? There's a whole lot of plot there. There's a lot of thick plot there that nobody's really digging into to figure out. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other kind of big stuff that happened besides that one. I think it's really worth thinking about the way that we're in a big story, and so how the media tells the story of those events, how they contextualize every event, has to do with what they decided the conflict is. They decided the conflict was democracy. That worked in 2020. So we have to save the republic by voting hard, and some people took that a step further and said, well, I'll save the republic by murdering Donald Trump. Stochastic terrorism is what they call it. Oh yeah, the Israel thing. Israel intercepted a bunch of pagers that were apparently going to people in Hezbollah, according to their, their Ministry of Truth. Then they remotely detonated those pagers and injured like 100 people and killed 6 or 7. It blew them up. If you're holding your pager, it like blow up their genitals and stuff. Why should you be disturbed by this? I see lots of people lauding this as a surgical strike. That's assuming that the people having the pagers were indeed worthy of being assassinated. Because these were assassinations. These people weren't dying in combat. Now, they may have been terrorists. We have to take their word for it. But what's more disturbing is that you now know that Israel can and will intercept an electronic device that is going to a person, place a explosive charge in it, and detonate it remotely to assassinate them. So those of you who are critical of Israel, the Jews can intercept your phone and blow it up, right? This should disturb a lot of people. It should be disturbing a lot more people than are disturbed by this particular event. This is not a combat action by any traditional definition of the term. These aren't people out in the field having a firefight, right? They are people that one state actor has identified as enemies worthy of assassination, and then they were assassinated, harming multiple civilians in the course of that. Now, less civilians, it's more surgical than if you just dropped a bomb on them in the marketplace in Jordan or wherever they were, right? If you went over to Lebanon and dropped a bomb on them in the bazaar and killed 100 people, and I also got the guy, it's more surgical than that for sure. And so it's better than that. It's a better method. But it's a method that we should now think, wait a minute. What happens when I'm the enemy? What happens when I'm the enemy? Who am I the enemy of? Right? Am I the enemy of the state? Could the United States get an auxiliary, allied intelligence agency to intercept an electronic device of an American citizen and detonate it remotely to assassinate them? I think they could. I think they could hack into your Tesla and drive it off the road if they wanted to. So, well, you're like, what? It's like, yeah, self-driving cars need to have really high security, because if your car has the capacity to steer itself, then that's a major risk for you as a person. Because if you are the enemy of somebody that's willing to expend a lot of resources to figure out how to hack that, then that's a problem. So yeah, this should disturb a lot of people, and most people are just not really thinking about it, They're not thinking like, oh, if I order a new phone, that phone could explode? It's like, probably not, right? You're probably not on anyone's list. But potentially in the future, who could be on that list? Maybe you, maybe someone else that you're affiliated with, maybe a congressman could be on that list. Maybe a political activist could be on that list. Maybe you. So how you approach things are, and I'm mostly a realist when it comes to international politics, but how you approach these things in terms of like, are you condemning the actions or not, kind of matters. Because state actors will respond to incentives. So if they're able to just blow up a bunch of people remotely by switching out their pager or whatever, and everyone's like, this is great. If you give them like a rubber stamp on that, then that's going to happen again. Who's it going to happen to next? You best start believing in cyberpunk dystopias. You're in one. Yeah, this is exactly my thoughts. You have no idea who was holding the device at the time or where they are. What if someone found it and went on a plane? What if someone found it and went on a plane? What if someone was holding their baby? What if somebody, it's more surgical than a bomb, right? The pager bomb is more surgical than like dropping a bomb on them. So if you're comparing that, then yeah, maybe the pager bomb's superior. But it didn't seem all that lethal. It seemed like it maimed a lot of people. It maimed and injured a crap ton of people. And it killed a couple of them. Yeah, it's because it's a really high explosive. It's like C4. It's like C4 charge that's in there. Like a little piece of plastic explosive and a detonator. You know. It can do a lot of damage. A small amount of C4 properly compacted with the detonator can have a huge explosive potential. You know, it's not on the level of like something nuclear, but I think pound for pound, plastic explosive is like some of the most violent explosive that exists. I could be wrong, obviously, but that was one of the things that I remember. Right? It's much more potent than if you had put a bunch of smokeless powder, which is nitroglycerin. So it's more powerful than if that was dynamite, for sure. You know, if you put a little, you know, if you could kill someone really easily by putting the amount of powder that you would put in like a 30-06, if you put that into a pager and had it encased in steel so it was under pressure and you detonated it, it would be like a grenade. It would really do a lot of damage. Plastic explosive is much stronger than that smokeless powder, which is nitroglycerin. A Trump economy allowed a lot of the DII and woke stuff to prosper. Yeah, but he didn't do that. Saying that's like, well, the economy was booming, so people were able to do bad things with money. It's like, yeah, but the economy was also people also had jobs. So, yeah, next time the economy is booming, we'll solve the diversity, equity, and inclusion problems. We'll learn our lesson. So let's keep that in mind. I'm not going to blame Trump for that, though. Accelerationists are like crapping in your own house in hopes that the house down the street will someday smell. Dude glows like the moon last night. Yeah. I kept waiting on YouTube and the stream never started. I checked Twitter and see that the stream has been going for a while here. It's going on. I'm talking to people on YouTube right now, so maybe something on your end. I'm sorry, Hardwick. I saw a video of an explosion caught on camera. It was surprisingly violent. Yeah, we just did that. This is exactly my thoughts. You have no idea who's holding it. Yes. Cyberpunk dystopias. Oh, yeah. CIA already did that years ago. Drove people's cars off the road, maybe? I've heard of that. Or, like, remotely making the engine explode. Have you ever seen Steven Spielberg's Munich? I have not. It's based on a true story about an Israeli intelligence operation that involved some rather extreme tactics. You know what? I think I did see it, actually. Now I'm remembering it. Yes. But it's been a long time, so I don't remember the details. I think I saw it when it came out. If it's the movie I'm thinking of. I hate how computers there are in cars now. Huge safety issue. It can be. You know, the computer in my truck has been running for 20 years without a problem. But it's like a self-contained system. Right? It's simple. It's not complex. When you add complexity, you add vulnerabilities, you add points of failure. This is stuff, it's not me being critical of Tesla or Elon Musk. These guys are really smart. They understand this. But, you know, it's a trade-off, right? So ideally, you want your car to be able to function without the computer. Not have, like, the computer in your car crash and that causes it to not be drivable, hopefully. Or to have your, this is why I don't like smart devices. It's like, okay, my Samsung fridge turned itself off because I tweeted something mean about Kamala Harris. That's nice. It just remotely bricked itself. You know, the company bricked my fridge for what I said on Twitter. That's a possibility in the dystopian future. So having things that aren't hooked up to each other is a very rational and robust way of developing anything. I don't want a smart thermostat. I did a whole thing about how bad the smart thermostat on this house was when I moved in it. I don't want that. I want the thermostat that is self-contained and will work for 30 years without any failures. That's what I put in there. I put a Honeywell thermostat in. It's a programmable thermostat. It'll work for years, doesn't require an internet update, doesn't need any of that shit. It will never not work. Oh, but what if I want to turn the heat on from my bed? I am willing to get out when it's cold in my house and turn the heat on. I can put a robe on or wear pajamas or something, right? It's not that big a deal for me to walk down the hall. Yeah. I hope our names are touching on the government watch list. I guarantee you I'm on some government watch list. I could still fly on planes right now, though. You know, I'm on something. There are academic papers claiming that I'm like a Russian asset. Because of Star Wars, guys. Not because of anything I said with an election. Because of freaking Star Wars. Stupid. There's an NPR article complaining about pods. Live in the pod and eat bugs. It mentions me about it. It's like, come on, guys. iPhone 16 Pro, a truly explosive experience. Yeah, it's not like the batteries on the Galaxy 6 exploding. It's like C4 inside the pager, right? So anyway, now that you know that governments are willing and able, not just able to do that, they are able to do it, they are willing to do that, and there will be no consequence for them doing it. That's what you're going to inherit with the pager bombs, is who's getting the next pager bomb? You know? Who's getting the next pager bomb? Donald Trump now will have to have his phone opened up to see if there's no C4 in it. Did you order a new phone? You better have absolute chain of custody on that phone, because someone could put some C4 in it. Oh, you know what? Sorry, Hardwick. There was an error when I tried to make the show originally, because I'm using Restream to make it, so I apologize for that. So the old link died because my Restream software said it didn't work, so I just did another one. I made another one, and so I apologize for that. That's my fault. Not blaming Trump for the woke stuff, more observing how it's ironic that they hate him when his policies kept them alive. That's a good point. Okay, I understand that. You know, but even so, you have to. It's a valid point, which is like, good times create weak men, right? If you have a really big economic boom, it can encourage lots of bad things. That was the case in the mid 2000s with Bush. Is a lot of the explosive growth of wokeness, I guess what we would call it, in the universities. When I was teaching at a university, happened in like the mid 2000s, when the economy was booming, when there was so much money, like money was being printed and just shuffled into universities. You could charge as much tuition as you wanted. There was so many different ways that kids could get loans. You could take out $100,000 loan if you wanted to, and not even go to class. You could take out $100,000 loan and buy a house with it if you wanted to, right? You really could. That's the way it was. So just huge amounts of money flowing into the universities. What did it do? Well, it pumped up the wokeness. You were able to hire as many liberal paper shufflers as you wanted. The administration exploded. You didn't have to hire any extra teachers, whether there were teachers to hire or not. You could spend the money on whatever you wanted. That's when a lot of the general education requirements started being rewritten to include diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was in the 2000s, because I was there for that. All of my syllabi had to include this little spiel about diversity and equity and multiculturalism. I had to have a multicultural content. Every course I taught had to have multicultural content in order to be general education. And you wanted all your courses to have some sort of general ed, to fulfill a general ed requirement, because that pulled people into your department, which pumped up your budget. So the politics behind the university system that are opaque to most people made a lot of sense to me. Is all about dictating what people would teach in a class, and professors would happily go along with it if it meant they could get more money for their department. Because you could teach a class, like if I'm going to teach a music appreciation class, we could have a lecture room of like 80 kids. And I used to teach guitar to like 50, 60 kids at a time. But I'm calling them kids. They were adults, right? They were college students, but 60 students at a time. So those 60 students, it didn't change my paycheck at all, right? I got paid the same no matter what. But I would people were dying to get general ed classes because the amount of kids enrolled in the university had skyrocketed and there weren't enough classes. So yeah, come on, I'll get you in the class so you can get your fine arts general education requirement. I have to have a unit that has some sort of multiculturalism thing in it. And so I had to do this whole write-up, had to do all this paperwork about how my course is multicultural and encourage diversity. This was 20 years ago. This stuff is not new. It's been going on a long time. And the mid-2000s boom under George W. Bush brought a crap ton of money into the universities, also getting rid of the your ability to discharge student loan debt, private loan debt. As soon as you got rid of that, private firms were coming out of the woodwork to throw money at students. Why? Because they can never discharge the debt. You had a permanent usury loan. You had a loan on that person's blood until they died. We'll give you as much money as you want. Yeah, it's totally, it's 8% interest. It's less than a mortgage. It's 5% interest. It's great. Here's $100,000. As much as you want. Do whatever you want with it. Now, I knew clever people who bought houses. Now, they thought they were clever. They're like, okay, I can get a student loan for $100,000, and this interest rate is 5%. The mortgage interest rate, because I have no credit, is 11%, right? And it has those balloon payments. Like, I'm just going to take out the student loan and buy the house cash with the student loan because they put it in my bank account, right, to spend on my living expenses. It's a living expense thing. And then I just do that. They've like figured out a way to basically pay their mortgage with a student loan. What was the problem? Problem was then the house was worth nothing and you couldn't sell it to pay down the loan. And selling the house wouldn't get rid of the loan. You know, so they took out a student loan to get a down payment on the house. Then when it turned around, in fact, I think so anyway, then when it turns around, the house can get foreclosed on, but you're still paying the down payment on it forever. You're still paying the interest on that forever. Anyway, I think Chinese cars had already started locking people inside for social or political violations. Or if it's not happening yet, it seems very likely soon. I also think this is a war crime for whatever that means, because you're supposed to know who you're targeting when you attack in the same way landmines are condemned. Yeah, landmines could kill anyone. If you have mines floating around in the sea, they're a hazard to everybody. You know, I think Chinese cars, we did that. Granted, landmines at least are normally deployed in a market battlefield far from civilian populace. This is brought into civilian areas. Yeah, here's a security camera footage of this blowing up in a marketplace. Blowing up, killing the guy holding the pager, and blasting the kid next to him. Collateral damage. He was a terrorist. Should that kid have not hung out there because of the terrorism? Should whatever country he was in been more condemning of the people that Israel says, this person that Israel identifies as a terrorist? Maybe. You know, but I think that sets a extremely dangerous precedent. What is it, hobo? What's wrong, bud? I got my dog here. He's like, I won't come in. Go lay down. The kids are still here. Why aren't you playing with them? Do you need to go outside? Well, go. Go bother them. He's not leaving. You left California, you're definitely on a list. So this is the other thing. California banned free speech. So Gavin Newsom just signed into a law that misinformation, speech which is that's misinformation is illegal, right? Which means that, you know, if I made a really silly meme with Joe Biden's AI voice, saying that he wasn't dead or something, was when everybody thought he might have died over the weekend. Can you guys call hobo? Anyway, I would go to jail for that. Now, that won't hold up because of the Constitution, hopefully. However, you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. What does that mean? Well, you're still going to have to go to court and go through that whole process of being convicted, appealing it, possibly going to jail in the interim, losing bond money, losing money to lawyers, if you have the money to pay a lawyer. And if you don't, maybe there's a pro bono, maybe there's not. You have to think about how the little guy is going to get severely punished. You're going to be in prison until eventually it goes to the Supreme Court and they're like, that we're striking down that law is unconstitutional. Because who decides what's misinformation? First of all, it's the government. So if you say something that's completely truthful, but they want it to be misinformation, you're going to jail, right? That's why we don't have that kind of standard, right? Versus a present hazard, right? It's like if I lie and say the building's on fire, everybody trample each other to death, I can bear liability for that. Versus me saying like something political, right? Like, they be eating cats. People of Springfield, please don't eat my cat. Why would you do that? Eat something else. That guy could go to jail. He could go to jail. He could go to jail for that. I'm trying to rebuild a 312D, Scott. 1967 solid state receiver. Oh. I would just do the tube FM tuner. Yeah, the tubes are going to be more valuable. The problem with old transistors, especially late 60s transistors, I know because I had a transistor hem in Oregon, is like they just don't hold up, right? Like the transistors just start to get scratchy and break down. Tubes, because it's like point-to-point wiring, you could change out the tubes. Like if the tubes go bad, you can change them out. But those old transistors, a lot of times they go bad. They don't last forever. And it's way more annoying to change out a transistor versus a tube. A tube has like a whole socket. You change it out and you're good. I'm just focused on tube stuff. Besides, like if you wanted to resell it, people are way more, oh, it's tube. It's a tube thing. They love tubes. Micro cathode array tube technology, which sounds cool. I moved back to America from overseas. I can't wait to go back. You made a mistake depending on where you came from. Yeah. California is not normal anymore. And I lived in like the most Republican place in California you could live, the most conservative place you could possibly live. I had like anarchists flying black flags all around me. And it was like, you're an island in a sea, and the sea is rising. The floodwaters are rising, and eventually it's going to overtake your little town where the cops are good and the people are good. Because of a state law, I could have some version of state police. The Gestapo comes and arrests me, and I have to go to county, and I have to get booked for saying something online, and I have to go through that whole process and post bond and pay a lawyer to then eventually have it. Right? You can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. And they know this. They know that it's not that the law that they sign. I have to look at like the specifics of the way it's worded, but that it's probably not going to hold up to constitutional scrutiny. But that's not the point. The point is, right now you can arrest people. Right now you can take them for a ride. You can take them for a ride right now, and you could use it to fire police officers. You could use it to fire prison guards. You could just use it against all your law enforcement officers to kind of purge them ideologically. The same way the vax was an ideological purge in a lot of institutions, right? People who were against taking the vaccine and felt that that was a violation of their bodily autonomy or just didn't want to do it, right? They were overwhelmingly on one side of the political spectrum. So it was an ideological purge. If you just force people to do that, you can do that. If I made a requirement of working at my establishment that you have to eat bacon in front of me, well, there's several sets of people who I'm just going to immediately eliminate. I'm going to have no Jews and no Muslims working at my establishment if one of the requirements is you have to eat bacon. Now, it'd be illegal to have that requirement because it'd be discriminatory, but it's not illegal to have another discriminatory requirement. Right? Now, if it's your religion, then you can fill out this long paperwork thing and maybe we'll give you an exception in California. Maybe, probably not. It's up to us. It's like they're trying to recreate Babylon or something. They'd probably view Babylon as good. I like learning about other cultures, but apparently my attitude is incorrect and colonizing or fetishistic now. Conservatives are the real people who value other cultures, because in order to value another culture, you have to value yours. You have to see that they're different, and maybe you could learn something from another culture. But even to have that attitude would mean that you have an awareness of your own culture and its strengths. Like, we do this, but this other culture does this. And I'm glad about the way we do it. Or I understand why they do that, and I know why we wouldn't do it. Or maybe that's something that might benefit us, right? People pick up cultural practices from other cultures based on whether they think they will benefit them or not. The problem is that multiculturalism, as it is not really multiculturalism for the left. The left wants a monoculture, but the monoculture they want is just an anti-white communist monoculture. They don't really want multiculturalism. They don't want someone to come in and spread out their prayer rug and pray to Mecca 5 times a day unless that disrupts Christians. If there were no Christians and it's just a guy praying, they'd be like, we got to get this backward guy out of here. We got to convince him there's no God. It's now illegal to pray here, right? As soon as the Christians are gone, the Muslims are gone too. You know what I mean? They only were like very pro-Muslim because they viewed it as being anti-Christian somehow, or being anti-Israel, right? They're pro-Muslim because there's a wing of the leftist party that's anti-Israel now. People pick a side and the whole thing is busted. Only pick the people that don't want the job. I went to grad school to become an engineering professor. Interesting. The political crap got so utterly insane that I gave up on that dream. Control over professorships makes academic freedom meaningless. That's true. I lived through that. I learned that very much the hard way. Another thing I can't stand about boomers, they defend Israel blindly. Yeah, they're like, go Israel, blowing up the terrorists. I'm like, what? Are you going to feel that way when my phone explodes because I said something online that somebody in the government didn't like? Or I said something in 2016 that then became illegal in 2024. Okay? So, like, are you going to feel that way about me? What if I said something critical of Israel, right? I'm saying things that are critical of Israel right now. What if I said something that was critical of Israel and it had an impact, and then Israel blew me up with the phone? You feel that way about me? I can be classified as a terrorist. Anyone can be. Anyone can be classified as a terrorist. David, do you like Far Cry games? Yes. I like the first 3. I haven't played Far Cry Primal. I like Far Cry Blood Dragon. That one is fun. Great aesthetic. Really fun, wacky gameplay. Very funny. Doesn't take itself seriously. Definitely, I think that was my favorite, is Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon. Last semester, my math professor was complaining that California is getting rid of pre-calculus and algebra as requirements for calculus. What? You can't even recommend those classes in any official capacity. So you just want people to fail calculus? Is that what I'm getting? Probably what they do is like, well, it's racially discriminatory because the only students taking pre-calc are Asians and whites. Okay, so there's an underrepresentation of blacks. And you notice that the response to an underrepresentation of a race is not to, well, can we have math study class for African American students? Maybe we could go target them to bring up their academics. It's, no, we can't make that a requirement. It's to reduce the requirements rather than to try to elevate the people who are experiencing a shortfall. And the truth is, a lot of times shortfalls fall out that way for a bunch of things that aren't under your control in the school system. It's like, who pointed this out? I think it was Thomas Sowell. It's like the Nobel Prizes that are awarded to Africans tend to be in different subjects than those awarded to Jews and Europeans. There might be, there might be a racial component there to like what subject matter you're going to be naturally inclined to be good at. And math may not be one, but I don't believe that means that there's like no math students who can do it. What you're effectively doing is just acquiescing to failure. You're just By letting in the unprepared minority kid, you're just ensuring that he fails. And by the way, like that cascade just keeps going, right? It's like you get rid of algebra 2 is a requirement to do calculus. Okay, so that means you're going to have students who haven't mastered algebraic thinking coming into calculus. So they've never done trigonometry and they're coming into calculus. So they're going to fail. Well, that's a problem. You're failing all the black students. I have standards and I just applied them. Okay, but you can't do that. All your failures and passes have to fit this ratio. In other words, if you're failing 15 students, the racial breakdown of those 15 students has to reflect the population as a whole. We can't believe that there could be any differences between any ethnicities when it comes to outcomes that can happen. So you just make it illegal to fail people in calculus. Teachers respond to this, by the way. Now, I don't know if I've done this particular rant, but I'm going to do it. In fact, I'm sure I've done it before. So teachers respond to incentives. If you get hassled as a teacher, you're going to not do the thing that's forcing you to be hassled. So a really good example is things like RTI, response to intervention. What is this? If a student's failing a bunch of classes, the administration makes the teachers fill out a bunch of paperwork. They have to do a big fat packet at a lot of schools explaining what they're going to do to fix the kid's bad performance. In a lot of cases, the teacher can't do anything to fix the kid's bad performance. It's impossible, especially in a math class. Let's say you have him in Algebra 2. You go back and you look at his transcripts. And I'm thinking of real students that fit this anecdote, by the way. This is not something that's just hypothetical. It's hypothetical in that I'm not talking about their identities. But there are real students that I saw that this was the case when I taught high school. And I know that this was the case when I taught college in different areas, right? That people didn't speak English. They couldn't write at a third grade level, and yet they were in my college classes. They were in my university classes. But with math, you have a student who's failed every math class since the 5th grade. He failed in the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. Here he is in the 11th grade. We got to get him through algebra so that he can graduate. I'm like, he can't do fractions. He can't do the 5th grade standards. He can't multiply 2 digits together and come up with an answer. And he can't figure out fractions with different denominators. He can't figure that out. He never learned it. And so as a result, he's failed every math class. You got to go back to the 4th grade and teach him basic arithmetic. He's never going to catch up. You're asking the least capable student of catching up to do 6 years worth of math advancement in 1 year so that he can graduate. It's not going to happen. You dropped the ball 5 years in a row by socially promoting him. He failed Algebra 1. What did they do? They put him in geometry. Not only, or they did this. I remember they put him in geometry and Algebra 1. So he fails algebra. They put him in geometry and algebra at the same time. You see a problem with that? Geometry requires algebraic thinking. So he just failed geometry and algebra. And so they just put him in those classes again. And maybe Algebra 2 at the same time. This is what you're up against. The social promotion will prevent you from having any standards. And if that rolls downhill enough at the college level, so what do teachers do? Is instead of failing the kid, they just give him a C- because that will eliminate their problem. They won't have to do 6 hours worth of paperwork about how they're going to fix a kid. They're just going to give him a C-, move him on down the line, move him on down the road. I had a student try to sue me once because I gave him a D. No, I gave him a C-. He tried to sue me once. And it's because he didn't do his work. He didn't turn in assignments. And I was like, what, dude, you didn't do the stuff that's on the syllabus. If you want to adhere to the syllabus, I let him turn in a bunch of stuff late. If you want to adhere to the syllabus, you'll get an F. So pick one. I'm being nice by giving you a C- because I was hoping you'd go away. But you sued me anyway. Or threatened to sue me. As soon as students figured out that they could threaten professors figured out that the best course of action is just to not fail any student that you think might do that. Just not fail students. So yeah, you get rid of that. And then eventually you can have people that get degrees. They can have a bachelor's degree in engineering and they don't do calculus. They don't know calculus. That's what you're going to get. It's coming. maybe it needs to come, because I think the usefulness of a university degree as a certification of basic knowledge, reasoning, or even subject matter knowledge has been weak for a while. And if we got rid of it completely, it would totally change the way that people operate. It would get rid of the value of that. It would crush the student debt, because people wouldn't need to go to college anymore because it's not worth anything, right? It's 4 years of drinking beer and getting your DEI points, and then you go on to a government job. That's what it'll be. Yeah, it's lawfare. Thank you. If you get jailed for speech violations and then they get overturned by the Supreme Court, great. You still have a criminal record. Almost every photo and video from the last few years of the attempted golf course shooter shows him wearing American flag apparel. He seems to think he's Captain America. Yeah, and so from his point of view, he's very patriotic, and murdering Trump would also be patriotic. And recruiting people to go fight in Ukraine is also patriotic from his perspective. According to the Supreme Court, you can yell fire in a crowded theater. How can Gavin Newsom... Well, so it's not that you can or you can't. It's that there are certain... This is my understanding. I'm not a lawyer. It's just from like basic study of law. You can be held liable for certain things you say that cause harm. Just like we have you can get sued for defamation. Now, that's a tort suit. That's not a criminal suit. You can't go to jail for defamation. But you can be civilly liable for things that you say that are not truthful and cause damages to other people. It includes newspapers. They can get sued for libel, and they have. How can Gavin Newsom pull a law like that out of thin air? Where are the legislators who created and passed it? They're there. The legislators created it. They voted on it, passed it, and he signed it into law. It's completely controlled by one party, and they are all for policing speech as long as they have control over what kind of speech they can police. And to be honest, it's a win-win situation for them because of the beliefs of the other side. Is that if they were to somehow lose control of their legislature, they know that the Republicans, there's a flaw with this thinking, but they know that the Republicans aren't going to enforce that law the way that they're going to enforce it. That they're not Republicans are not going to put district attorneys in place. They're not going to put all the people in place to enforce the law against their enemies because they believe in free speech. So it's a win-win. Whenever you are in power, I ask for freedom because that's in accordance with your values. When I'm in power, I take away your freedom because that is in accordance with my values. That's from, I'm trying to remember which Dune book, but anyway, that's one. Frank Herbert kind of got it. Now, the flaw in that thinking is thinking, yes, we have a one-party state, but will you and the people who think like you always have control of that party? Because control of the Communist Party in Russia has switched several times. Well, I mean, it's gone now, but like it switched several times. There were different parties within the party. Same thing in China. There were Maoist parties, and the Maoists eventually got outed from power. So what happens when you are in the minority of your own party and the things that you say get you jailed? They don't think that far ahead. There's not an assumption that like the party could change and I could be somehow on the outside the Overton window at some point because I didn't, because I said something critical of Israel, which is okay right now. Maybe it shifts over and now I'm in jail for calling Israel a terrorist state or something, or saying something bad about Israel. It's like, that's misinformation. You can't call them that. That doesn't fit the definition of that. You have to issue a public apology and go do this community service, or else we'll throw you in jail. Watched a mini documentary last night. Dude was interviewing people in Springfield, Ohio. Very enlightening. The pet eating is the least of the things going on there. Yeah, the pet eating is just a really short, efficient way to get to they are not mixing well. They are a foreign community that doesn't mix well and is causing problems. It's just a shorthand to get to that. It's like, okay, you get that they have weird cultural practices that are abhorrent to the American population, and they're doing all of them. They're killing chickens in voodoo rituals and all kinds of shit like that. You know that they're going to be doing that, but that's the least of it. It's like they're driving and crashing their cars. Your insurance is going up through the roof. Like, my insurance rates are doubling. Because the insurance companies look at it and they're like, well, there's a bunch of accidents in Columbus, so we have to charge you more for driving your car. You know, my car insurance was really high in LA, lower in Central California, and then it's higher, a little bit higher in Houston. I'm in a major metropolitan area. I know I'm kind of out in the woods in that area, but I'm still in the area. So therefore, the general risk assessment of there's people who drive badly in Houston and they drive worse in Houston than they do in Paris, Texas. That's in play. You know, there's a general risk that you're not. I might be a great driver, but I'm not in control of all the other people on the road. Maybe Trump talking about the cat eating was his way of inspiring controversy and memes to bring attention to the Haitian migrant issues. Yes, exactly, 100%. And it's brilliant. It's created songs, it's created memes. It really cuts to the quick. It gets over all the bullshit that people are like, immigrants commit less. It's no, they don't mix well. They're not like us. They crash their cars. They're acting like they're still in Haiti, but they're here, and they're outnumbering us now. Yeah, a lot of people in the military left because of the vax mandates. My husband among them. Wow, good for him. You know what? That takes a lot of integrity, a lot of personal discipline to be able to resign your commission if you're a commissioned officer, or if you have your commission, to be able to resign your commission over personal belief like that. And you're like, no, I'm going to take it to the mattresses. I knew people that walked away from retirement, like they almost had their 20 years, and they walked away because they're like, no, I'm drawing the line. I'm not going to do it. It's like, you're not going to get a retirement. It's like, I didn't join the military to get a retirement. I joined it to serve my country. And I'm not going to serve my country by letting them inject foreign substance that I'm against, that was made with aborted fetal cells, and which I don't think is necessary. I'm not going to do it. That takes a lot. I mean, that takes a lot of fortitude, moral fortitude. It takes a big spine. Right? You have to have like a martyr's mentality to know, like, I'm going to suffer so that other people, as a witness, right? It's like, no, I will suffer that because I just have a line. I have a line that I'm not going to cross. It'd be like if you get court-martialed for refusing to fire on civilians. Like, that's a badge of honor. You disobeyed orders. I won't fire on civilians. I'm not going to do it. I'm not firing on the American people. I could totally see that being a court issue in the next 30 years. I'd say probably not immediately, unless something really big happens in this election cycle. But there'll be some kind of disturbance, like they'll call it like an insurrection, like January 6th, and they'll order the military to fire on civilians. It could have happened on January 6th. And those that refuse that order because they're not going to fire on American civilians will be court-martialed, and they'll have to suffer for it. But you know, so it is. But I think part of the ideological purge is to get rid of those people. Oh, you want to inject this into you? Well, we know who would refuse the orders to fire on civilians now, too, don't we? Because those things are going to overlap a lot. The people who wouldn't take the vax are the same ones who would refuse orders to fire on Americans. Yeah, apparently Haitians have been laying low since the news got big. Someone told them to behave. They might be clever enough to know not to do that. You should watch and review the Am I Racist? It's super hot right now. The problem is Matt Walsh did it, and I intensely dislike him. So I don't want to give him any money, attention, or anything like that. Even if he did something good, he's such an atrocious and annoying personality. I want him to fail, and I don't want to give him. He hates me, right? He hates me. I don't want to give money to people who hate me, and that includes Matt Walsh. They're now accusing Trump of inciting hate crimes against the Haitians in Ohio. Yeah, and that was a big hoax. Here's all these bomb threats. Turns out they were all hoaxes. But people remember that there's a bomb threat, and they blame it on Republicans, even though it's Democrats that do it, because the memories made in the moment, they contextualize it in the story, like we're talking about. They put it in the conflict. Oh, these evil Republicans. They just remember it in the course of their grand conflict, of their story that they're telling. Forget the details that comes out later, that all of them were were phoned in by spoofed overseas things. They were either pranks or they were done by, a foreign government. The journal is getting hysterical as a performative shtick. Yep, righteous indignation to help out Kamala. A few months ago, gang leader Barbecue was waging war against the Haitian government, eating people. He was eating people, eating his enemies to gain their strength. Literal cannibals. Yeah, there's a difference between equity and equality. Well, to them, equity is like investment in something. owning something. I never got that far, but they use it for a bunch of other things. I never got that far in math, but I still know the value. Yet I never use it in life as an artist. Culturally, blacks are behind because one started before the other. That can't be helped, and blaming the past won't change that. Even then, some natural intellect does exist. Yeah, and it's kind of, there's a flaw in thinking that's like, oh well, there's all these gigantic differences between various ethnicities, but the brain and the mind would never be one of them. And that's not me saying like, oh, these ethnicities are dumb or something, right? If you took a PhD and you dropped him in rural Africa, he'd be dead pretty quickly, and the people that live there off the land would laugh at him. They'd be like, silly white man doesn't know how to do anything. He can't grow a potato. Yeah, keep in mind that the smartest people don't know how to grow potatoes. Right? They don't know really basic things that stupid people know how to do. So the difference in knowledge, right? Like what's a guy out in rural Africa, what does he need to know calculus for, right? His mind doesn't need to think that way. It's only you in a different selection criteria where you start to identify people that have that potential. Being a victim is desirable these days. If you're bad at math, it's not your fault. If you try to get help, you risk realizing that maybe your strength doesn't lie there. After World War II, blacks and whites performed the same in Europe. Interesting. Yeah, there's also, a lot of times you're comparing incomparable individuals, right? It's like you compare, if you're comparing the students of the children of black doctors and the children of white doctors, that is a more interesting comparison because you're coming from really similar back versus like collecting all the whites who have all the white collar work against all the blacks who a lot of times have much less of that white collar work and much less of that background. Like, what are you really identifying with that? It's kind of like the gender pay gap. It doesn't exist if you compare men who've never been married and women who've never been married. They get paid the same. Men who are married get paid more than women who are married, and men who are married get paid more than men who aren't married. And women who are married get paid less. Why is that? Well, it's because women are having children. And men, when they're married, there tends to be an uneven division. So the man goes and he makes more money by focusing on work, and the woman does all the domestic tasks, and there's an increase in efficiency that results in more wealth. That's the way it tends to work. And it's not wrong for women to do domestic tasks more than men, for men to do more work outside the home. It could be the opposite. It could be the woman makes more, but that's the way it ends up panning out because we don't act the same in every environment. Women have children because the process of being pregnant and giving birth is takes quite a bit out of a woman. Expecting them to have the exact same career trajectory as a man who never deals with that, but is really motivated to provide for a woman who is dealing with that is not a comparable. They're not comparable. Whereas, like, if you have a man who's not married and does all the domestic tasks for himself, a woman who's never been married does all the domestic tasks for herself, doesn't have any children, then the gender pay gap is almost non-existent. Failing math since 5th grade math. Yeah, I'm way behind on the chat, by the way. Yeah. They did that to my nephew and to many more in low-income areas. They don't care. Line got to go up. Got to pump up those graduation numbers. Yeah, you just graduate them. And like I said, teachers will give them C minuses just so that they're out of their hair. They don't have to do more paperwork. If you fail the kid, you're going to see him again. You have to have conferences. It adds to your workload whenever you fail a kid. So any teacher is going to have to weigh that. It's like, how many kids do I really want to fail, and what do I really want to go through for this kid? And if like the kid's getting a D and you're like, C minus, see you, get your C and see you later. I've seen kids in middle school that couldn't read keep graduating. Yeah, I had kids So I had students, adults, in a major four-year university who could not write a paragraph in English. They weren't foreign. They were from the United States. They were, and a lot of them were not, like, they weren't children of Mexican immigrants. These were white kids. These were Asian kids that couldn't write. Couldn't write a paragraph, right? They had to write a 1,500-word essay, 2 of those, in order to graduate the class and get credit for it. So you had to write a total of 3,000 words in the course of the class. They couldn't write 1 page. They could barely write 1 paragraph. And this was a writing prompt. This was like a concert report was one of these. And so I had a huge list of things. And if you just went through all the bullet points and you wrote a sentence for everything I had, you could not do that for less than 1,500 words. I had engineered it so that it would be impossible to not hit the word count or be so close that I wouldn't care if you just answered every single point that was there. And so the students that were in it were like, oh, I have to write a sentence about this, and they just wrote a sentence about how they felt about all this stuff, and then they got an A. They did all the requirements. They hit everything on the rubric, complete sentences, didn't write LOL. People were writing LOL in their university papers in 2006, whenever I was teaching, right? They were writing LOL. People didn't even have iPhones. They're writing LOL in their university, their paper at a major 4-year university. So I had kids who couldn't even do that. They couldn't handle looking at a list of things. Like, it's just 20 prompts. Write something for all 20 of those prompts and you get an A. They couldn't do it. Couldn't even understand the prompts. They couldn't read the assignment. Right? I wrote the assignment in too high a level. I wrote it at a 8th grade level. It's too much. They had connections, it's fine. They fail enough, it's fine. I graded music theory final exams for my comp professor. I followed his answer key and failed half the students. I asked later if he did fail them. He passed them. Parents and deans complain. Boy, you nailed it. No, I didn't have that problem with music students, but I had it with general ed students. It's a social certificate. That's what a degree is. You went to school, yay, you're Phi, Beta, Kappa, Alpha, Omega, Theta, Iota, Eta, Pi chapter. You get cool. All right, you have a job. You wasted 4 years and $100,000. It's like someone's like, I want to be a writer. I'm going to get a creative writing degree. I have a daughter of a friend that's this way. It's like, I got to go to UCLA and get this creative writing degree. I'm like, do you really want to be a good writer? I wrote a book on how to be a good writer. It's not that hard. It doesn't tell you anything about how to write stories. All you have to do is sit down at your computer and practice. Same way you're going to get good at your instrument. Get it out of its case, play some notes on it every day. Play, practice, do things you can't do on it yet. That's how you master your instrument. It's not by showing up to your university classes and listening to the professor talk. You got to get your instrument out. You got to shred. So, like, yes, you can do the creative writing degree, but if you're not sitting down and working on your projects for like an hour a day, it's not going to happen. Same thing with, you can show up to your music classes. If you're not getting your instrument out of the case at night, I can't help you. You're not going to make it. Remember what the Bible says. They will think that they do good when murdering God's people. Delusion is real. I love dogs. Hobo. Yeah, I'm way behind. You guys are crushing me on the chat. I'm sorry I'm so far behind. I read a professor who got around this problem by putting 2 grades down on each exam. Their political grade, he gave them avoid trouble for himself, and the grade he feels they ought to get. We should just have standards. So I'd say this, you have 2 jobs as a teacher. One is to communicate the information, and the other one is to certify. That's the grading part. Certify that the student has that knowledge, those skills, that they've mastered it. If you're not doing the second one, there's no reason to bother with the first one. I read the pager op was planned differently, but 2 Hezbollah agents found out the pagers had explosives. They killed one, but the other one got away, so they detonated them all before he could warn the rest. Interesting plot. That's an interesting plot, but hey, who's it going to happen to next? It could happen to an American. The Dominican Republic has a wall and trained snipers for these reasons. Yeah. It's like, listen to what Dominicans have to say about Haiti. Actually, I would say the island of Hispaniola is one of these great places on Earth where you can see the profound difference in possible outcomes based on how people organize themselves. Not like, I know that Haiti is predominantly African and the Dominican Republic not so much, but it's more about the organization, because you can see this in places like the Korean Peninsula, Hispaniola. You can also see it in South Africa. The South African one gets ignored a lot, but if you were to compare, for example, the black population in South Africa to the black population in Swaziland, which is a landlocked country completely within South Africa, it's like, it's insane the difference. Swaziland is like a traditional tribal government, and everybody has to like go out of Swaziland into South Africa to find work. Things have changed so much over the last couple of years. I did like a research project on Swaziland at this point decades ago, and it was just really eye-opening. It had 50% of the people had HIV. It was insane. But you went right across the border into South Africa, and it was like everything was so much better because of the functioning apartheid government. Now, I'm not going to stand for apartheid here because that's a whole other more complex thing. But the fact is that there was a functioning governmental body that may have decayed over the last two decades, but then in the 90s and 2000s, there was still functioning society. So the functioning society just across the border, everything was better. And then going to Swaziland, and it was like real grinding poverty, massive social issues, massive medical issues, malaria and HIV. Crazy. Anyway, but the Korean Peninsula, South Korea, it's all lit up at night. North Korea is dark. South Koreans are like 3 or 4 inches taller than North Koreans because of nutritional differences. This is the same ethnic group. 70 years ago, they were the same people. They're ethnically the same. They're genetically the same. But they have now phenotypical differences. They look different from each other because of their governments. Because the communist government is so bad. It's so bad at providing their nutritional needs. It's so bad at providing for their health needs. It's so bad at providing for their domestic needs. That they are... Now, they're also... South Koreans have some obesity issues now. So I don't want to say it's... Now, capitalism comes... all that plenty of cheap food and stuff also means that people can get fat easy. It happens, right? Hypernutrition is a consequence of the incredible power of the capitalist system to distribute food and all other kinds of resources cheaply and efficiently. Food is so cheap and efficient to distribute that now we have an obesity epidemic in the United States. Food is so cheap, people can't stop eating it. Go to North Korea, they can't get food. They're short. They're micro Koreans because of malnutrition. So you can see this huge difference. Hispaniola is a big one. You have the Dominican Republic, which is, if we're comparing it to Haiti, it's like night and day in terms of the functional government, agricultural products and exports. It's not just cigars, guys. It's not just Dominican cigars. They make a whole bunch of other things, right? The sanitary system, like everything about it, roads, like the Dominican Republic continues to progress upwards and get wealthier, and Haiti gets poorer and poorer and poorer because of how they're organized and to some extent like who's on each side of the border. But it's really that how they started and how they were organized, it's made a gigantic difference. Like you can just see it. It's insane. We have, you can see it with Texas and Mexico, but you have to be more local because there's Tejanos, which are Spanish Texans. They're Americans. They're not Mexicans. Tejanos are not Mexicans. They are Tejanos. Tejanos versus Mexicans across the border who share a similar cultural and genetic identity. What's the difference in achievement and status between those two groups? It's more narrow, but because you're in the American system, things are better. I've seen some Democratic Republic people online talking about their neighbors, generally not very flattering stuff. Yeah. Lost some respect for my dad and neighbors and friends' parents because they caved to the vax pressure. Trying to understand their point of view, but it still feels like they failed a test. My mom is so deep in TDS, she hates war but believes the military when they say they had to stop Trump from starting wars. They can't explain why they failed to stop 2 wars under Biden. Not only did they disobeyed Trump and engaged in military attacks against his orders. This was totally brushed under the... Yeah, there was military action against Trump's orders, against like Syrian targets and stuff. So they actively disobeyed the commander-in-chief to engage in acts of war. This happened. I'm trying to remember some of these specific examples. It's been years. I need to like make a big catalog list when I come across these things. That'd be a better way to keep track of it. But yeah, you can Google it, like generals who said that they ignored Trump and then engaged in acts of war. Insane. When the arriving immigrants are descended from our ancestors, cousins, and siblings, maybe then we could be more receptive to immigration. Well, they're descended from the siblings of people who immigrated 10 years ago. Chain immigration. It's pretty bad. Yeah, Matt Walsh is such a boring person. It's not that he's just boring. He hates you. He hates me. He's just so boring. He is boring, but he's just so pedantic. He's just such a normie con with this kind of stuff. Against fun, no cultural power. Just he's the limp dick of understanding culture. He's totally the guy I'm talking about when I say conservatives don't get culture. Matt Walsh is the guy I'm talking about. The people like Matt Walsh. I don't like Walsh either, but you work with the weapons you have, not the weapons you want. He's a tool that can be wielded against the greater enemy. I'm not going to give him time and attention. Sorry. I think he's controlled opposition, just like his bosses. Never even had a handgun. Handguns are cool. Very useful. If it doesn't work, you can always hit them with it. Men with motivation do crazy things compared to single men. Yeah, this is another thing. I am so much more productive with children and a busy life than I was without them. How is this possible? And I have to remember this. It's when I said, like, man, I wish I had time to like do this. It's like when you had time to do it, you did less stuff because you just weren't motivated. Like you didn't have things to pay for. You didn't value your time correctly. And so once I had kids, I started to really value my time a lot more. Kind of wish I had you as a teacher. I would have discovered how much I love writing sooner. I wasn't a writing teacher. I was a guitar teacher. So it's just how it is. So be so embarrassed to use chat speak in formal writing. No one ever told them they weren't supposed to do it. And it was kind of new. So that was what it was. They were talking like they were on ICQ or AOL Instant Messenger. Those were things back in the early 2000s. And that's just how they typed. They didn't know how to write any other way. No one ever enforced upon them formal grammar rules or a formal style to writing nonfiction. And I don't even write nonfiction in a highly formal style because it's not engaging. So I tend to write in a semi-formal style for most of my articles and my nonfiction books, and sometimes in weirder styles for stuff that maybe I haven't come out with yet. But like, the point is to engage the reader and really make them think and respond to what you're saying. And so to that extent, academic writing doesn't fit that bill for a lot of kind of market-facing nonfiction writing. But you got to master it if you want to understand and you want to get through your academic career. You got to be able to write with a formal style that communicates information accurately. My brother was nervous to start college after his military service. I told him the bar was so low he'd be shocked. The bigger problem that I've noticed from veterans, sorry for the like snorting. I have these really bad allergies and something about the fan, something about this room. Anyway, the bigger problem I've noticed with military veterans going into college is that they're going from a highly structured environment where there's a mission, there's a purpose. Everything they're doing is being directed towards something. And if it's not, at least it's an order and you have to do it, right? To something without any of that, where they have to be self-motivated. And so what ends up happening is you have to like really quickly figure out how to develop your own discipline. And some guys can't do that. They're like, they can't see the forest for the trees for their education, or they just kind of feel purposeless and adrift. It's a really common experience. I've talked to lots of veterans who've had that experience, whether it's at college or just in real life. They get out of the military and they're like, I gotta have a job. And so they like find a job somewhere and they're like, I guess I just go to this job and I just do things every day. And there's no like, how do I advance? Oh, there's no, how do I get promoted? It's just the civilian life just lacks so much structure and purpose compared to when you're in the service. It's like night and day. So that's the big adjustment. Is really not everybody here is so, the bar is low, yeah, but it's really, how do I be self-motivated to be great in this situation? You have to really find something that's that you're passionate about. And some of them do, and they have excellent success. They're able to take the lessons they learned about having an organized life from the military and then organize their life in that way. But a lot of guys, that's a trouble because they weren't really into the organized life. They did it because that was part of the program. They really wanted more freedom, and then they don't know how to balance that. And they just kind of like flop around for a couple months after getting out. They have to figure it out. It's really common for college freshmen to like flunk half their courses or even all of them their first semester. And I think that's also true for guys who get out of the military, is they have to kind of figure out, I have to be really self-disciplined, and I'm not used to that. Husband's a veteran doing college currently. It's definitely a culture shock. Standards were way higher in the military track we were in. Yeah, like I said, it's in my experience, it's more just like figuring out how to organize your life, figuring out how to be motivated and to care about stuff that is just, and it's like little things that drain your soul. It's like, write this essay about this thing that's zero importance. Maybe if you were like an officer and you were used to writing like fluff things, but like for a lot of guys, they're just like, I can't do this. Writing a sequel to my first book while listening to this stream, by the way. Awesome. It's a space opera very much like The Stars Entwined. I had John on to talk about that. Writing a cogent, intelligible email to a professional colleague will be a rare skill in the future. I am going to push back against that in a second. The work together cooperatively to a high-level crisis precedes the general competency crisis. I agree with that second part. Now, I don't think it'll be a rare skill, but I think people will rely on things like Grammarly. They'll rely on AI to tell them how to do it properly. So I think the AIs will actually train people to write emails, and it's going to be a terrible style. But you're going to have this corporate speak, Grammarly AI style of writing emails, and that's what it's going to be. People will be trained by the AI to write a certain way. There's an ongoing national competency crisis. I expect bad service and subpar products now. I expect it too. Now, I'm going to give you another little bit. I'm actually out of time, so I need to wrap this up and get through the chat really quickly. But service at fast food restaurants was better in California than it was in Texas. Why? Because the people in California were just smarter than the people in Texas. What? Take people in Texas dumb? No. It's that the people in California had fewer options. They were working at Starbucks or In-N-Out because they had no other work options for their level of intelligence and their just who they were, right? They're just, work was harder, so you took what you could get. So there was a higher quality level of employees in California than there was in Texas, where those same people that would have been working in In-N-Out were working in doctors' offices and doing all kinds of other more productive things with their skills. So they were actually making more money here and being more productive compared to California, which basically cleared out the bottom rung for people who are just lower skilled and just not as motivated and good at their jobs to do the fast food stuff. It's an interesting thing that I noticed when I moved to Texas. And by the way, I haven't done this like thoroughly, but like that would be controlling for, a lot of the factors that you could probably imagine for, right? See, talking about circuits that I'm not good enough to know about. When you have order, it'd be better. The Korean example is even more stark when you consider that the North originally had more resources and infrastructure. I think 90% of South Koreans are also nearsighted now and need glasses. That's because they don't go outside enough. I saw a YouTube video on it that convinced me of this. And I was like, why didn't I ever need glasses? I was like, I was outside like 8 hours a day or something. I just wasn't inside reading all the time. So I think my dad being outside with my dad all the time helped my sight. Now I am farsighted now, especially my left eye. So I do wear reading glasses to kind of help with the reading thing. But I'm old now. I didn't really need them for the first 40 years of my life. So I'm doing okay. One apocryphal, but yeah, it's because the eyes actually grow too long from staring at things close to your face. So as you read more, bookworms do have glasses. It's not just a fake stereotype. People who read a lot end up nearsighted because they're reading a lot, because they're not spending enough time outside with their eyes focusing in the distance. Throwing a football. Get outside and throw a football every day with your kids. Get your kids outside playing. I'm doing my best to get my kids outside playing every day, even when it's hot. One apocryphal story I heard about Haiti is about the big earthquake a few years back. Army Corps of Engineers went in after the quake and stated that the roads were just as bad before or after. They brushed it over pretty quick. I remember, but it's okay for the military to override the presidency because democracy. The democratically elected leader. I think our is a relative term. Yes, our and we, those are dangerous words. We can be used to obfuscate personal responsibility and also to include people in things that don't belong. Like when people say, we won the Super Bowl. I'm like, you did not win the Super Bowl. The football team physically near you won the Super Bowl. That's who won the Super Bowl. You didn't win it, right? Or like, we bombed Nagasaki. Now, of anyone in this chat, I'm the closest person to say we bombed Nagasaki. My grandpa bombed Nagasaki. He was on the mission that dropped the bomb. I'm the closest we. But I didn't drop the bomb. I did fly that mission. No one here made any decision relevant to bombing Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So you're including me in a moral decision that I had no part in. Right? That's the point. It's like, we bombed Nagasaki and we should feel bad about it. It's like, why should I feel bad about something I didn't do? I didn't do that. I wasn't alive. I wasn't born. And I didn't decide that, I heard people claim that Matt Walsh's attitude on social media is just dry, deadpan humor, like he used in Am I Racist? I'm not sure that's the case, though. I think some of it is, I think it's just engagement farming, but I think he really does believe certain things. Like, I don't think he really thinks anime is satanic. I think he's just trying to get a rise out of people and get some engagement. I really do think that. I think he's very clever. But, like, all of his opinions are very blasé. George Marshall overrode Congress and the president on China policy. He called a ceasefire and demanded Chiang Kai-shek put the communist rebels on the ballot. The rest is history. I don't think I've ever met a person that I liked everything about. That's normal. That's normal. And this is a thing that some people have a problem with. It's like, this person didn't like me. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's like, well, what did I do? So you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. It's not about you. You don't have to worry about everybody liking you. Life is a lot more free when you don't worry about that. I struggled with motivation and purpose after the military. My husband has a specific degree he's working on, so that's the road he can follow. I can understand that. Well, I didn't get out of the military, but I have witnessed that a lot, and it's one of my good friends. I don't have his guitar here. Like he was a Navy SEAL, and when he got out of the Navy, hopefully he's not watching this, and I'm not like mischaracterizing his story. He just was like adrift, It went from not just being in the Navy, but he was a Navy SEAL, like this tight team. It's all about the mission. It's all about the team. To I'm alone, and I can do whatever I want, and no one cares. No one cares about me. Maybe who really cares about me? And what do I do? What do I need to do? I have this vision. I want this. How do I do this? Who's going to guide me to this? Who's going to give me the orders for how to do this? He wanted to be a musician, and he had all these passions, but he didn't know how to execute them. And he was used to commanding. I'm trying to think what rank he was when he got out. E6. Whatever the Navy's E6 is. I'm not sure. But He was used to being in command, and like, but the command was directed towards a mission, and so now he's like, I don't know how to do this mission. And maybe my friends can help me, but none of us were military guys. We were artists. And so like my advice is like, oh, you could do this, 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 and you got to get out and gig and this. And it's like, oh, I'm scared of that. It's like, well, you got to get over that. What if no one comes? No one's going to come to your first gig. You just bear that pain in your heart for your whole life that people don't give a shit when you first start at something. Right? It's like, yeah, you got to do it. And I'm like, he had anxiety about performance. I'm like, you've been on mission, you've been shot at, and you have anxiety about getting on stage and people not liking you. And it's, I didn't take the time to really think about how that he would really feel about that. I was like, dude, it's nothing compared to like a real fight, right? But it's like, no, but it's more than my body's at risk, like my soul's at risk. Like if I put my soul on display and people don't like it, that's going to be as bad as dying. I just wasn't listening, you know? Sometimes people tell you stuff and you're not listening correctly. That's how I believe he felt about it. I did some college before the military too, and the same issues though. I absolutely loathed the free-for-all of the system. I had problems with it my first 2 years. I wasn't like a big party animal really. At the time, you know, it wasn't structured. I came from a really structured thing. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do, and there was no clear path for how to do it. So eventually I figured it out, and it's like I wrote those lessons in the Keys to Prolific Creativity book. I wrote those lessons down so that I could share them with people. But I didn't come into being able to practice and be, you know, create all these that was years of learning how to work. And when I started college, I just really had no clue. I wasn't really good at anything until my junior year is when I really figured out how to be a good composer, get my work done, practice, get good at an instrument, like be able to be part of an ensemble and really be good in that ensemble. It took me almost 3 years of failing at various stuff, right? Like I failed a jury and it was like really stressful. I'm like, how did I fail? I didn't practice enough. I didn't practice my crap. I just wasn't good enough. I didn't practice. So I had to learn how to do that again. And I was used to practicing whatever I wanted to in high school, like for hours a day. I had to figure out how to direct that practice properly. One of my roommates in college had just gotten out of the Marines, came during summer school, flunked all his classes, and depleted an entire economy-sized box of condoms at Burning Man. Not an uncommon experience, man. Sounds like he enjoyed civilian life. Not uncommon. You know? A lot of times people come out of the military and they end up with drinking problems. Not because they have like PTSD, but because of that structural stuff, right? It's like they just can drink, and so they just fall into a habit of drinking. It's not like they're self-medicating or something. They just end up drinking, and they're not like full-blown alcoholics. They just end up drinking too much and too often because they have the option to do it as a civilian, right? Where the options to do it when you're in are more limited. Like that still happens, right? But you know, it's like, oh, I could drink a 6-pack right now if I wanted to. I think I will. It's like, okay, we all have that transitionary period in adulthood where we have to figure out the limits we want to set for ourselves. So it happens with guys when they get out of the military too. It's a bit like being born again. You know, you come out in the world and you're like, oh, it's like being 18. And just because you are maybe 24 and you were in for 6 years, right? Like you were enlisted, and you come out at 24 and you're like, well, I'm a super mature adult. I know all about discipline. And it's like, and then you fall into a habit of drinking 5 beers a day because you can. And then you have to stop and take stock and like, okay, I picked up habits because it was too much opportunity. I was giving myself too much slack. You know, I have to figure out how to dial it back in, right? Everybody goes through that. You know what I mean? Thank you for the super chat, Sound Engraver. I appreciate it. I'm trying to get through all the chats. I really appreciate it. I have worse than 2,500 vision. I've read a ton as a kid. Dang, but like you don't need a jeweler's loupe if you have that. You could just like put the diamond up to your eye. You're like, I can see it perfectly. My focal point is right here. I'm like a baby. You know, babies can only see like they're really nearsighted. They can only like see the nipple. That's what I'm told. I don't know that for sure. They don't. It's kind of hard to test a newborn. How many fingers am I holding up? And he's like, Employers in some states takes advantage of military folks working 10 hours a week for years, even 12, but I'm sure they need some money. If they were getting paid overtime, like, if I'm running a business, I've heard lots of business guys, they're like, I love military guys because they just will work. They will actually work their hours, right? I don't have to tell them to do stuff. They know how to do the LB, and they know how to look busy, especially Navy guys. It's like, they're always sweeping. They're always doing something, right? They're just working for the whole 8 hours. They don't have to be told, like, can you go sweep or something? It's like, what do you want me to do? No, military guys will just do it. They're like, I'm at work. They were on the ship. They were used to sanding and repainting everything. So they just do that in the warehouse job. Okay, I cleaned it up. I found a mess over here. I fixed it. By the way, that's how I got ahead in a lot of my jobs, is I had that attitude. Not that I'm ex-military, but I just had that attitude from living with my dad, who was military, right? It was like, no, dude, you just always be working, right? And one of my first jobs was with this hard-ass Armenian that, like, if you sat still for a minute, he had this, like, he'd be sitting in his office, you couldn't see anything. He'd step out, why aren't you doing anything? Oh, how did you know I was sitting at the counter? Oh, because I gotta go do some stuff. So military guys would just do that. Like, they just work. They don't have a problem working. And they'll work overtime. They're like, can we get someone to, I'm their boss. How many hours do you need? I'll make money. And the other thing is they can stack that cash up too. A lot of the guys I knew who got out of the military were very financially successful because they just knew how to work. They just knew how to work hard, and they weren't really afraid of it. And so they just would build up side businesses and things like that. Had a lot of success once they figured it out, No ambiguity using our and we as ethnically, racially homogenous societies, kind of like the U.S. 60 plus years ago. Navy E6 is petty officer first class, right under chief. Okay. Easier to topple a wall than wrestle your soul. Maybe he was chief, though. He might have been in E7, though. I don't know. I thought he was in E6. I can ask him. He has a gold star. People don't know. It's like, you get a gold star. It's like, a gold star is a big deal. Easier to topple a wall than to wrestle your soul. They rather work the hours than go to college for days. Yeah. That's true. Because college is like, no one's going to even check attendance if I go to class. Whereas, like, if you have a job, it's like, I have to go to the job. The job starts at 8. I'll be there at 7:50. Ready to work, boss. And I'm going to work until it's time to be done. And then I'm going to clock out and I'm going to do, So that kind of structure, it's really easy to fit into. Versus college, it's, what time do you want to go to class? Do you want to show up today? You have to go write this paper. Figure it out. That could be it could be a big adjustment. That's all I'm saying. It's a big adjustment to like a really purpose-driven day-to-day existence. My son is 7 months old today. Awesome. He had a blowout. So I missed a little of the conversation. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, awesome. It's a great time. 7 months was a lot of fun. They started crawling around. I have a Sherwood receiver. Yeah, my receiver is Sherwood. It's pretty good. Pretty good receiver. Nice and clear. I don't have it hooked up to good speakers right now, though. Took him to the aquarium. Oh, awesome. He had some fun, but he'll have more fun when he's older. Yeah. All right. I'm way over time. I've been going for now 2.5 hours, but the chat was great. I really appreciate the super chats. Let me link everything. Join my Patreon. Come hang out with me. There's a Discord. I'll send out the Discord invites like maybe after this. You can also support me on Substack. I have a Substack article that comes out every week. I have a YouTube video coming out every week too. I have those lined up for a while now to get some other hidden projects ready for like a crowdfund in the future. So that'll be coming down the pipe. But in the meantime, you can get like up to 4 free books for joining the Patreon. You get the Keys to Prolific Creativity, my guide for establishing a creative process. You get the monthly book, which this month is Farewell to Once and Future Kings. Is it on here? Yeah, I think it is. Shop. You can just buy it from here too. It's not available on Amazon because I only want it, if you're going to buy it from like Amazon, then I want you to get it with the Pulp Rock collection. So I will show it real quick. It's over here. There you go. Farewell to Once and Future Kings. And yeah, so it's a cool little spy story. You can grab that. And you'll also get the Prince of Twilight, which we've been writing live on the air. And I will do that next one Saturday at 6:30. Not Saturday. Friday at 6:30 is the live write for anybody that cares about that. I know I don't have as many people show up to the live write as to just talking about this kind of stuff. But, you know, if you want to hear keys clack and some ambient music, then that is an option for you, and you may actually enjoy that. So I'm gonna leave it there. Hope you guys will have a good rest of your day, rest of your evening. I'm gonna go eat some dinner. Thank you for dropping by, Marbella. That's a cool name. Yeah, thanks for hanging out with me. Don't forget to smash that like button on the way out. I don't know if there's anything else to link. Let me link a book. What book? What's a good one? Oh, I talked about this one at the beginning, so I'll link it. Al-Shafal. This is the fantasy tragedy book. Fantasy tragedy book. There you go. And I'll see you all next time. Have a great, great day.